Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, Dopamine swipe.
What is going on? Welcome to the 817 Podcast, a Monday morning show about the great city of Fort Worth, where we break down local trends, culture, and stories that really impact where this city is going. And so thank you if you're a regular listener who's subscribed. If you're new, welcome to the pod. Usually I have a co-host, but both co-hosts today are currently on spring break or family vacation, so you just have me. However, I have made this a special episode because we have two interviews with some of my favorite Fort Worthians. Now, the reason why I interviewed these two people is because we are coming up on a very important local election, and who we decide to represent us is going to be really important on where does Fort Worth go from here. Yes, we're one of the biggest cities in the country. But how do we play at a global scale, and how do we become a destination for 21st century knowledge-based workers and companies who want to provide their employees a place that is relevant, cost-effective, and trending upward? Now, I think Fort Worth can be that place, but who we elect as mayor, city council are going to impact how that looks. And so this pod is all about talking to people who I believe knows where Fort Worth needs to go. So my first guest is Carly Burson, founder and CEO of Law de Label, a sustainable fashion company that empowers women around the world to find financial freedom through safe and meaningful employment at living wages. As a company, they don't measure their success by profit, it's by impact. Their fashion model is revolutionary and changing the fashion industry toward a more humane approach where the earth and the maker are equally valued to the customer. And I know, a big brand in this, kind of sustainable fashion space is Everlane. And I just honestly think that we are lucky to have like the next big player, if not already kind of getting there, is Carly. And so she lives here in Fort Worth. Her company is here in Fort Worth. And it's crazy that her customers are around the world and she chooses to raise her family here in Fort Worth and run her team here. So I'm excited to talk to her and just get her opinions on what she's looking for the upcoming election and how is it to be an entrepreneur here in Fort Worth. So here's Carly.
Yeah, so I am not originally from here. I am an East Coast girl. I thought I would die in the East Coast. I'm originally from Massachusetts, but my husband got relocated here. At the time we were living in New York, and I fought moving to Texas pretty hard. I never really imagined that Texas would be my home or that it would ever even feel like my home. But, we were supposed to be here for like a few year contract, and 8 years later, we're still here. And it's definitely home for us. And it's a community that we've fallen in love with, but not at all what we expected. Yeah.
And can you go ahead and kind of talk about the transition of Tribe Alive to Law de Label, and also just talk about what is your goals and what are you doing for from just the business side? That'd be great.
Yeah. So, it's been about, 7-8 years since I started a social enterprise, which is a women's fashion brand focused on empowering and employing women that live in at-risk situations all over the world. We were formerly known as Tribe Alive. That was our original brand name, concepted a little over 8 years ago. And then we've been in the middle of a rebrand process for about a year and a half. It was definitely a pretty extensive process, now known as Law de Label. And the pandemic definitely set us back in the timeline of what that process would look like and when we would be able to announce our new name. And last year, as a country, just facing such a hard year and an awakening for a lot of people in regard to just racial justice and inequalities, we felt like maybe we weren't completely ready to take our brand in the middle of a pandemic to a whole new platform and name, but we just kind of felt like it was focused on and centered around wanting to honor all people and, wanting to, as a brand, represent that we honor different perspectives and that we're inclusive and that we believe in equality and diversity. And our former name did not stand up to that and wasn't something that represented, what our internal beliefs were as a brand. So we went through a pretty extensive, pretty difficult rebrand process over the last 6 months and announced our new name in January. So we've been running for about 2 months now under the new name. It's, we kind of say like same brand, same vision of impact, just new name. So all of our pillars that we focus on are the same. All of our partners have remained the same for the last 7 years or so. It's just kind of moving forward with a vision that we think is more representative of who we are, who we've always been, and hopefully a way to earn trust back from our community that is so important in our journey.
Yeah. And I remember when I first kind of witnessed you in action was at a Voca coffee shop, and I was sitting there looking homeless like I usually did before the COVID. And I was sitting there working, and you were right next to me, and you were speaking to, I believe, a potential investor. And I was just so blown away about how much you were leading with the impact and leading with the purpose over this, like the scale or the profit or the margin of the business. And it was just so refreshing to hear, and I remember just hearing that presentation. I don't know what happened from it, but I remember reaching out to you after that. I was like, hey, it was so just awesome. And so how do you feel like
that's how we connected? That's right. That's how we connected. And I wish you had tapped me on the shoulder and been like, hey, he's an investor, so talk about money instead of but no, for us, it really is it's like I didn't start a company to make a lot of money. I started a company to make a difference. So I'm glad that you were able to recognize that in that meeting.
Yeah. And I think let's actually talk about what is it like to run an international brand in a city like Fort Worth. I mean, you're a strong leader. You're someone who has, strong views of how the world should run, and you don't hide away from that. Something I always admired, just following you and the clothing company, and just how has that been? And starting in Fort Worth, and just where would you like Fort Worth to see to support more entrepreneurs? What is needed here to help more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I'll be really honest. Fort Worth has been a difficult place to run a business like mine, and to be a female founder with the ideologies that I hold really near and dear. I mean, I will say, I think we have an amazing community, and I think Fort Worth is changing, and I see a lot of activism and activating within our city that I hadn't seen before, just in the last couple of years. But it's a challenging place to run a progressive business and to be a progressive woman in the entrepreneurial space. I mean, for starters, I think, really transparently, sometimes I'm a little bit ostracized from certain groups that are important to be in order to kind of be recognized as a Fort Worth founder and to get potential funding or potential press, because I do speak my mind and I don't lead my business to appease all sides of the aisle. I lead my business to hopefully stand for what I believe to be right. And I don't focus on likability. So I do think that sometimes, there's been multiple times that I've thought maybe we would be more successful if we moved our base, whether it be or LA, where, to be honest, most of our customers come from, and just a place that might be a little bit more, is viewed to be more progressive, or where ideologies and the things that we're speaking out against are just accepted by the general population. So there were a lot of times in the early years of the business where I didn't speak out as much, because I kind of witnessed how other business owners in Fort Worth behave in a way of needing to sort of, appeal to everyone. And I kind of fell in line with that in the first couple of years. And I lost myself. And I would say probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was just done with that and decided, I live here, I run a business here, I contribute to the community here, I raise my children here, and I'm going to speak my mind. And if people are going to be for us, that's wonderful. And if they're not going to be, then that's okay too. So I do think that sometimes I don't feel like I completely fit in here as a business owner, and that's sometimes hard. But I also feel like I can be a part of much needed change in Fort Worth. And if I were to move somewhere else where everyone thinks like me, I'm not as needed. So I definitely feel like there's like a really big opportunity for what we can kind of push forward here in Fort Worth. I also think another thing that's been challenging is just attracting the right talent. We're an e-commerce brand. We need people that, and we're a fashion brand, and we really have a hard time finding the right talent here in the DFW area. Most of our candidates are in New York, or they're in LA or San Francisco, or if they want to be in Texas, they're in Austin. And it's not only just based on the skill sets that we're looking for, but also based on, it's really important to us to hire candidates that align with our brand mission, align with our ideas of social justice. I mean, even when we were adding to our team this summer, an interview question that was asked is, talk to us about how you feel about Black Lives Matter and how you feel about a brand that represents Black Lives Matter and speaks out against social justice. And that was important to me, how people answered those questions. And it's a topic that not everybody that's from here, has been raised here, is really comfortable answering in a way that I was comfortable with. So I think for us, really attracting the right talent, progressive talent, thought leaders, I do think that Fort Worth has an opportunity to attract a different caliber of professionals that we desperately need in our city, not just for employees, but entrepreneurs who want to bring their businesses here, whether that be in tech, media, fashion, really unique retail experiences. I think we view business in Fort Worth from a smaller lens of small and local, which is so important. And those are some of my favorite businesses in Fort Worth to support. But we need bigger players to come into the city to actually help stimulate the economy and support those local businesses in a much bigger way, and just bring, new, big, fresh ideas to a city that I think is so desperately in need of it.
I love it. Yeah. And I totally I feel like I relate too, in the sense of just being a founder of color, or a founder of bootstrapped, no family friend round over here, and figuring out how to do this, and also have an impact play, because in education, what is so now that we I don't know how you've thought of this we've been calling it like this post Betsy Price Fort Worth. What are you looking for, and what would you like to see from, potential city council members that will be representing your district, but then also the mayoral election? It's a pretty crowded group right now, and I guess would just love to know, how are you thinking about local politics, and how it impacts your thinking?
Yeah, I think local politics are everything. I think one thing that's really shocking is that only 11% of our city are elected Betsy Price. 11%. So I think that should tell us something. I personally think she was a terrible leader, and, not somebody that I would have chosen to elect. But when you see that only 11% of the population is showing up and electing our local leaders, it's why our leaders don't represent our population or the needs of our population. For me, I like that there are a lot of candidates in the race. There's a lot of really great candidates, some really progressive candidates. Just the other night, my neighborhood block threw a gathering for Elizabeth Beck to get to know her. We're going to be doing that more with some other candidates that are on the ballot in May. But I think, one, civic engagement is going to be really important. I think it was really wonderful to be a part of and to see Tarrant County turn blue in the presidential election. And, even when we saw it in the Senate race, when Beto ran and how close it was, people show up for those races. But what we have to recognize is that as a city, we have to be showing up for our local elections, because that's where things happen for us. That's where things happen for our children, our communities. And May is a really important election time for us. For me, I'm really looking at candidates that support raising the minimum wage. I think it is a tragedy that Texas continues to be one of the few states that still thinks it's acceptable to not have a state minimum wage and falls in line with the federal wage of $7.25, which nobody can live off of. It's actually a human rights issue. And I think there's still a lot of businesses in Fort Worth, even small businesses, that continue to pay people minimum wages. So I think what we've seen from our community is we need leaders to force us out of that like archaic payroll expectation, because people are living in poverty in our city because we don't have a fair wage. I also am really looking at candidates where education is key for them, looking at the demographics of our city and seeing the percentage of how many kids are white, how many kids are Black, and how many kids are Hispanic. Yet it's mostly white people making the decision when over 48% of our kids are Hispanic in this city. We need representation for them. We need leaders that come from the communities that these kids come from. And it's just, for me, it's really hard that, we just continue to see like such misrepresentation of what our population like compared to who our elected officials actually are, that aren't equipped to handle the needs and the challenges of our city. So for me, it's really about candidates that are going to speak out about racial injustice, issues with policing in our city, issues with district that is completely racist within our school systems. And then, as I mentioned, the minimum wage. I think those are sort of like the big hot buttons that I'll be looking at as I kind of work through the hundreds of candidates that we need to really educate ourselves on to be able to make sure we make an informed choice.
I know one time when we talked, you kind of really said like your kids are really holding you in Fort Worth because they love it. I guess like as that kind of evolves as they get older, I know they're still really young, but like, is there a point where you say if Fort Worth doesn't fix something, it might be that thing that makes you and your husband decide to relocate? Like what's your relocation barometer right now for Fort Worth?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I go back and forth, like super honestly. I will say our community in Fort Worth, I don't think we could ever recreate. We live in Fairmount. We live on a block with over 17 kids on one block, really diverse from a racial perspective, socioeconomic perspective. I couldn't imagine raising my kids with other parents and with other kids. So it's just the experience that we're having as a family is really fulfilling. So if I were to just look inside like my life and my bubble, it's pretty ideal. It's pretty ideal. And honestly, my business, our team is really phenomenal. I mean, the people that I get to work with every day at Laud the Label, it's like they make the brand what it is. And I just couldn't imagine moving the business somewhere else and risk losing people that have like walked alongside me in that journey for so many years. So there's a lot of things that keep us here. I definitely had a moment after the insurrection and the debacle at our Capitol building back in, I guess, what was that, January, where I felt like I didn't feel safe here anymore. I sort of felt like, okay, we know people like that exist. We know that there's danger out there, but now we know that no one's protecting us from those people. And still, there's really very little accountability for what happened. And Texas was a state with leaders that refused to stand up against what happened and even took it even further, trying to dequalify our election. And moments like that, those are really big moments for me where I kind of step back and think, is this the right place for my children? I'm raising girls of color. So for me, it's like, is this the right place for me to raise them? Are they safe here? Are things equitable here for them? Are they going to have the opportunities here that they would have elsewhere? And even for women's rights, Texas continues to chip away at a woman's our health, our right to health, our right to reproductive rights. We chip away at it. And that's something that's really important to me. And I have 3 girls that I'm raising up. So I do think about those big issues, but I do come back to, what I spoke about before, where I want to be a part of something and I want to be a part of change. And I don't know that like running off to a blue state where I feel like, I'm more in my comfort zone is really where I can make a difference. And I just feel like Fort Worth needs people to stay here that want to be here to fight for it for the long run and to fight for progress to move forward. Because I think our city has so much potential if people would just be a little bit braver to really speak their truth and be willing to get uncomfortable and learn some of the things that they were raised with. So as of right now, I think we are here. But that is something I go forth on. I mean, it's a hard climate. The last 4 years have been really hard.
Yeah. And yeah, even this stimulus package that just got passed by Biden, a historical bill that's going to get people out of poverty, and our House of Representatives from our region voted against it. And, that represents Fort Worth. And so you're having, I know Mr. Wright's seat up for this May. And so there's a lot of decisions around this. And I think what you mentioned, only 11% of people voted for Betsy Price. The average age of someone who voted was 66, when the average voting age of a Fort Worthian is 41. And so I do think the people you inspire, your staff, the young entrepreneurs and creatives around Southside and Fairmount are going to be important to spread that conversation to get their friends to vote. I guess my last question for you would be, what have you seen in the evolution of Fairmount and the Southside, and what do you like, and maybe what do you want to see more of? As I truly believe, we had Mike Brennan on a pod earlier, and I told him how I just think you guys are our South Congress of Fort Worth, and if we're going to get creatives and tech to say, wow, this is cool, an arts goggle, like these little things are what's going to make it sticky. So we got to be very thoughtful on how we curate that. How do you feel it's going, curating Fairmount and South Main?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like Mike Brennan and his team and, Megan Henderson, like they have just been such champions of small business owners. It's been a really hard year to be an entrepreneur during a pandemic, in a time where, we didn't really have as much support as we should have had from elected officials. And their team has been phenomenal. I would say that is one thing that I have just loved to witness and be a part of over this last year, is how, one, resilient our entrepreneur community is, how supportive they are of each other. The sharing of resources that goes on, it really feels like a collaborative community, not a competitive community. And I just feel really proud to be a part of it. And I do think that New York Southside has really fostered that. I think I mentioned this before. I do think that Fort Worth needs to start thinking a little bit bigger. I think we view business from like a small lens. It's always about a new bar, a new restaurant. I just want to see more innovation, businesses that are unique and creative. And I think we're a city with, we're a little bit of a one note. We have incredible bars and incredible restaurants. And I think, honestly, I prefer Fort Worth to Austin when it comes to food. And I do think that that's a really important part of culture. And these businesses are the backbone of our community. But I just want to see innovation come here. I want to see tech come here. I want to see media. I think that we're lacking the right level of journalism in Fort Worth. I think we're lacking unique retail experiences. And I think that we have to bring in outside talent that knows how to bring those businesses in. But I also think that typically those type of businesses tend to be progressive, and they tend to employ progressive people. And it goes back to leadership. It goes back to politics. It goes back to like electing progressive officials so that we can move forward progressive policies and plans and innovations to actually attract those type of businesses. So it's sort of like, the chicken before the egg. But I do feel a little like the Fort Worth growth has been great. It's been actually pretty phenomenal when we look back at the last 10 years, but I think 90% of it is a lot of the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate the perspective. And I think it's exciting to definitely have someone like you who are pushing the envelope. And I love the part where you said, like, we have to, there has to be some progressive leaders and entrepreneurs who see Fort Worth almost as it's almost like an entrepreneurial thing. It's like seeing a cute house that needs some tender love and care, and it's going to become valuable if we treat it and do it right. That's how I feel as someone as well who feels like is choosing Fort Worth over other places. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. No, I'm grateful to be here. I mean, I know I mentioned a lot of things that Fort Worth could do better, but there's a lot that we're doing really well.
I love it and totally agree. And so my next guest, by the way, and thank you, Carly, for being on the pod. I think what Carly says there is really important to think about. Being someone who's relatively newer to Fort Worth, Fort Worth is such a town that just loves to play nice and that everything's happy. And I think that's a great place to live. But as we need to get outside our comfort zone and become a little bit more, globally competitive, it needs to take kind of people like Carly to show some of the areas where we need to improve. And so I really love that about her. And so someone else who is a true Fort Worthian, and we're honored to have a part of the pod, is Jennifer Trevino, who is the executive director of Leadership Fort Worth. So Leadership Fort Worth is the oldest community of leadership development programs in the nation. And basically it allows us to recruit, establish up and coming leaders in so many different areas of the community to make sure that Fort Worth is building people who are prepared to take the city to the future. And so the thing about Jennifer, I met actually Jennifer through Carly at Avoca Coffee. And Jennifer was also a leadership. She went through the leadership program in 2009. Prior to joining Leadership Fort Worth, she was the chief development officer for Girls Inc. of Tarrant County, where she led fundraising, marketing efforts, ensuring growth and sustainability. Also, she ran for city council 4 years ago. So we're going to be able to get her perspective and views on that as well. So really excited for our final interview with Jennifer Trevino.
Thanks again, EJ, for having me. So excited to be here with you. My name is Jennifer Trevino, and I'm the Executive Director of Leadership Fort Worth. Brand new to the role, just under 3 months in the position, started in January, but super excited to be in this role, especially with this time in Fort Worth. So a little bit about me. I have lived and worked in Fort Worth for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years at the end of this year. I married a native, and so, he has some pretty strong roots. We, in fact, still live in the same neighborhood he grew up in the second house now, just down the street from where he grew up as a kid. His best friend still lives in the neighborhood with his family, in fact, too. So strong roots, it's going to be tough to get him or me out of Fort Worth. So a lot of that is why I'm here. And, I got involved in the community after graduating from TCU and getting my MBA. I had made the switch, used the MBA to pivot my career from the retail store operations, growing up, going to work for H-E-B Grocery, Target in college, and wanting to make a shift. And so after my MBA, I had all this free time, supposedly. It started volunteering first with the Hispanic Women's Network of Texas, the Fort Worth chapter, becoming a mentor and really working with the women in the organization to do good things in our community. And then also befriended another neighborhood resident at the time, Sal Espino, who's a former council member now. And I became kind of that squeaky wheel, asking questions and learning different things. And also about the same time, I made the switch from working in marketing at Radio Shack to move over to UNT Health Science Center, so higher education and healthcare. And that also gave me the opportunity to be more involved in the community. So all those things kind of came together to really give me, opportunity to be involved with the neighborhood and our neighborhood association on a grassroots level, getting involved and going through Leadership Fort Worth, the BACK program, and really understanding kind of the ins and outs of how the city works, the big challenges and issues that we still to this day are sharing with our participants so they understand what makes the city work, where are the ways that they can plug in and make a difference and get a broader understanding, a deeper understanding of the community, but also where we're going to be part of that. So be part of those solutions, be part of the opportunities that are coming up, and getting involved both on a personal level, but also with their companies and their organizations too. So, I credit in many ways, not only some of the people that I've met during my time at leadership class, but also the program itself as being one of the sparks that led me to run for city council, in 2017 as well. So even though I didn't win, I'd made a commitment that I was still going to be involved and get back to Fort Worth. As you saw from my T-shirt that I'm wearing, I said, love Fort Worth, and I want to be part of our present and future. And so that's a bit about me and how, I think Leadership Fort Worth is giving me that next opportunity to make a difference.
I love it. And can you describe how Leadership Fort Worth works, just for people who may not know what Leadership Fort Worth is?
So we're a community leadership program. There's programs like ours all over the country. We're part of the Association of Leadership Programs across the country. But Fort Worth is one of the oldest. We're coming up on 50 years, and next year was the 50th anniversary of when we were formed. And in 2023 is the 50th anniversary of our first graduating class. So it's an application program. When I went through, it was just leadership class for professionals that are looking to kind of mid-management and looking to get more established and involved in the community. And then there's also Leader Kids, which is a program we partner with Fort Worth ISD and TCU, mentoring and leadership development for eighth graders, usually about 30 to 40 kids across the community, where we're having to shift things a little bit because of the pandemic. And then not long after I finished my program, we added in Leading Edge. And so that is for a younger professional, kind of 20, 30 something, really trying to understand the ins and outs, get ready for board service. What does it mean to get involved with a nonprofit? And then a few years back, we added Leader Prime, which is for CEOs, both CEOs that are especially targeted new to Fort Worth or new in their role, so that we can help make sure that they really do fall in love with Fort Worth and learn more about the ins and outs. And it's an abbreviated program, but really popular with new CEOs. And then last but not least, we have Leader Forum, which is a program for all of our graduates across all programs. So kind of a continuing education opportunity so that they can stay engaged, know some of the pressing issues, be part of the conversations as we continue, and even still continue to network with each other, since we have about 4,000 alumni over the 50 years that we've been around. So
yeah, that's so awesome. I think being that you went through the program and like your Fort Worth story hit so many important parts of Fort Worth, TCU, Radio Shack, running for city council, things like that. What do you see? What do you love about Fort Worth?
One of the things that I love so much about Fort Worth is the ability to get involved, ways that you can plug in and make a difference in how our community comes together. We saw that with the winter storms. We've seen that with the pandemic. So I think that community spirit is alive and well. Whether you've been here 2-3 years or you've been here 10 or 20 years, or born and raised here, I think you see that and you feel it and you catch it early on. And so I don't think, it's hard to find folks that are willing to help and want to pitch in at any level, whether it's, hands-on or through organizations or what have you, their companies. Some of the things that, I'd love to see us, some of the things I'd love to see us work on. We have some aging infrastructure that definitely needs attention, as we saw recently in storms and, throughout. I think too, we want to do some things that level set some of our neighborhoods. So that's been something I've talked about when it was my city council campaign, or even when I was advocating for our neighborhood during the gas well drilling site heyday, just making sure that things that happen in nice neighborhoods can also happen in older neighborhoods, poorer neighborhoods, and vice versa, that the things that happen in poorer neighborhoods don't get pushed into those areas just because maybe there's people that think that it's okay to do that kind of thing. So I think just kind of a sense of a bit more fairness. And I think some of the things, I was on the Race and Culture Task Force for the city of Fort Worth, and some of the things that came up to light, intentional or not, that systemic lack of service, things that were built into the systems that cause neighborhoods, especially people of color, that didn't have the same opportunities, that weren't getting the same service levels. And so, really getting that documented, and the city working on that, and the city departments really working on that. To me, that was one of the things I was proud of being part of that work, is raising that and getting it documented to the point where, okay, it's not just, someone's perception. There's data to back it up. So I think those are the things I want to see us get better at. I think, we're at the cusp of some things. I think that'll really start to come out of the pandemic too, with a spirit of entrepreneurship. We're one of the youngest cities, not only in Texas, but even, from a generation standpoint, not just Texas, but even the country, and then our size, and just there's so many kind of things, I think, coming together where I feel like we're on the cusp of more entrepreneurs coming in, really people kind of coming into their own. So the 30s and 40 somethings, really kind of stepping in, and kind of a generational shift, so to speak, is what I'm kind of seeing. And I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned kind of your time, running for city council. What is that experience like for people who have never done it? And like, what is your thoughts through, like, what's some of your advice for people who are running maybe now, or what you're seeing as important to that race? Because I think you have a lot of people. There's a lot of stack races, and so very youthful people, like the generation you talk about, very experienced incumbents. What is your advice? And then also, like, I guess, what do you recommend for city council?
Yeah. It's, from my experience, it was probably one of the things that one of the most challenging things I've ever done, most rewarding though too. I met some amazing people that I wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to meet. And, it's also very humbling. So it's very humbling to be in, different parts of town and different parts of your district, and be knocking on doors and asking people who it's probably pretty obvious they're dealing with some other things, that some of the basic food, shelter, clothing issues, and you're knocking on their door trying to ask them for a vote. Just hearing everybody's perspectives and whatnot it's very rewarding. It's challenging too. And I think one of the things I told people is, when they say you're going to run for office, you really are running. I was a full-time candidate, where I wasn't working full-time from March to May. And during my campaign, and when I finally, got a chance to breathe, I told folks it was kind of like a combination of having the flu and the hangover, because you just, all that momentum, all that adrenaline that you've been running on for months kind of comes to a halt. So I would definitely say pace yourself, but work hard. You don't want to leave anything on the table. You don't want to do, regret any opportunities, any visits, any, events, any phone calls or whatnot. You want to make sure you've done everything you can when you're all done. But I think for me, the other thing that experience taught me was, just the importance of having so many different people involved and having more diversity at council and in the mayor's office. And, I am not the smartest person in the world, but I know how to put some smart people around me. And I know that there's a lot of folks that, are working hard to make our city better. And so you got to be part of that. And not just be I'm one of those folks that's like, don't just sit and complain, like be willing to get involved. And so whether that's in your neighborhood, your church, or, community group, whatever it is, do your part. So as far as advice, you're talking, there's tons of people running. I did some research looking at how many just for mayor for right now, right? So we had 11 candidates originally. We have one that withdrew, so 10 current active candidates right now. So, so the odds are, there'll be a runoff in June to help narrow that field down, and then we'll see how it all shakes out. But I think, more than ever, one of the things that we talk about at Leadership Forward is community trusteeship. So a willingness to work together to take ownership, right, of the city that we're in, and really make sure we're trying to do the right things to service for the community at large. So that involves a lot of listening, making sure you really care, and then leadership, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I'm curious, when you were running, were you like a more progressive candidate at the time, or like when you ran, I guess cause I know Fort Worth is, dealing with, like there's we turned blue during this last presidential election, but, I know in city council, oftentimes, young people don't go out and vote as much as the more traditional older people of Fort Worth who vote. So I guess like I know those are experiences. So I guess like what do you see from like the political climate in Fort Worth that's maybe different or maybe the same as when you ran?
Yeah. I think we're seeing a lot of folks just continue to move into Fort Worth. I mean, it's been 4 years since I ran, and there's been, continue to have huge population growth in all different parts of Fort Worth. And for different reasons, and especially now with the pandemic too, I think we're seeing the market be pretty hot still. When I ran, one of the things that was interesting was that a big chunk of my district that I was seeking to represent, that area didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, so we're seeing that in other parts of Fort Worth too. And so as you have people coming in from different parts of Texas, different parts of the country, different countries, they're bringing different perspectives and things, but at the same time, at the root of it all is everybody wants, those basic, we say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But we also talk about, a good place to live, good jobs, education that, affords good opportunities, all those things, healthcare that helps you when you're sick or, keeps you from getting sick. And we have differences of how to get there and what the various levels of involvement are. But one of the things when I ran is, folks, just an educational process, right? So understanding, what does city council do? What does the mayor do? How does that work with the city manager's office and the staff? How does that work with the county and the state and the federal government too? But what I'm seeing is definitely more diversity, both from a generation, a mindset, work balance, kind of lifestyle, just lifestyle in general. I mean, you're seeing younger folks, they're getting married later, they're having kids later, or not having kids, such as the case with my husband and I, and, not necessarily wanting to be in the suburbs, but more of an urban lifestyle that lets them, kind of walk, live, work where they are. So I think we're seeing a lot of those things kind of more modern, I guess, in many ways. So, I think it's that blending of people talk about, Fort Worth's always been funky town, according to my husband. And then the mindset around being a cow town and Western and whatnot. So I think you're really seeing much more of that mix mash in the people that are here and trying to make it their own city.
I think it's so awesome. I think it's just so awesome that you have like that depth of Fort Worth. And I would love to, I guess, as we get ready for a local election, what are some traits, as the executive director of Leadership Fort Worth, what are some traits that you look for, that you're going to look for in leaders as you vote, as you decide on candidates for your city council, for mayor? What are some traits that you're looking for?
I'm looking at their records. So what have they done so far? Because you can talk a lot about what you want to do, but I think, often the best predictor is, what have you done in the past? How have you approached things? How have you led people? Who are the people around you? I think that's an indicator too of, people can tout that they support diversity and everything, but who's in their circles, whether they're personal or professional. Those are some of the things that I'm looking for. Diversity isn't one size fits all. And it comes in lots of different shapes and sizes and colors and flavors and all those things. But I think more than ever, what we're seeing from the last few years, even post Race and Culture Task Force, and a lot of the factors that led there, led to that task force being formed. I think that is one of the biggest things, is ability to work with all different kinds of communities that make up Fort Worth. So that's one of the top things that I'm looking for. The history and what they've done, both, professionally and personally. I'm also looking to see, do they listen? Like, do they really listen? How do they show that they truly care about people, or is it more about the title and the role? Are they really trying to serve the greater good and make a difference and make an impact so that Fort Worth's a better city to live, work, and play in? And then are they inspiring too? Like, I don't know about you, I want somebody who's going to help me get excited about where we're going. And that is somewhere I want to go, So I think those are some of the things that I'm looking for, and then figuring out how to get people involved, right? Like, I think that's the other thing, is who's working on, you look at that, look at who's working on their campaigns, who's on their staff, where are they getting their donations from? Who's endorsing them? Endorsements are a thing, but it's not an end all be all, but, you got to be able to get your message out there. You got to be able to talk to people. And again, it's that track record, I think, that really is important. And it's not just I served on, well, it's almost like, when you're doing, what did you do when you served? Like, what was the difference? If you hadn't been there, what would or wouldn't have happened, kind of thing. So I think that's what I advise people, is really get in there, watch what they're doing, pay attention to all of them. I know there's a ton of candidates right now, and especially, like I said, even in the council districts, there's 4 in mine, 3, the incumbent plus 3 more. And, those are the things to look at. Those are, what is the track record? Why are they running? Especially when there's incumbents, it's always like, well, why make the change, right? Those are the things I'm really looking for. And obviously integrity, is a huge one too, right? So integrity, looking for a sense of fairness. And again, just that gut feeling that they're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I think what's cool, when the last time we spoke about like Leadership Fort Worth, and you also mentioned how it's one of the oldest like kind of leadership programs in cities, you really, I feel, in your job get to experience both the I guess people in power that's been in power for a long time, but then also this fresh wave of like new leadership classes that are just coming into your program. And so how's that experience been? And it's not everyone gets that opportunity to see that combustion of the old guard also investing in this new class who might be a little different.
Yeah, it's really been interesting. So, the program's changed even from when I went through them. And I've had the opportunity to sit in. So we're doing a leadership class of 2021 is virtual and compressed. And so I've been able, as much as I can, I try to attend the program days and sit in and listen. And I learn from not only the presenters that we bring in to talk about different topics and share information with the class, but also the class's discussion and their questions and the dialogue that comes with that. It's very interesting and rich, and definitely, to your point, gives me that snapshot of what are people talking about, what are they caring about, how are they seeing it. And I think the infusion of diversity, equity, inclusion in everything we do. So we're being mindful to not shift that we're now becoming back a DEI program, but we are a community leadership program that is paying attention to that is definitely infusing that both on what is our board reflective, is our staff reflective of the community we serve, all those things. And I think, there's definitely, I think, some of the old guard type of thing, whether it's in Leadership Fort Worth or in our city, that is really kind of nervous about what does this mean? Because they're nervous about what does it mean for them, right? Change can be hard. And that's what this is. Changing the guard, handover of generational, whether it's influence, wealth, power, or all of the above. So I think that's what really is cool to see. But, you know, the participants are so much a key ingredient to the program being successful, because if you have participants that are just, okay, listening and not engaging and challenging, because that's the other thing, is you get the opportunity to challenge and ask questions you wouldn't have normally asked. You know, a department head at the city, or a nonprofit leader, or an elected official, or what have you. So I think it's pretty cool that you get to see that. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that generational, you know, like you said, it, combustion is probably a good way to phrase it. It's not a fire brewing. I don't know what it is. But there's energy around it. And it's exciting to see, because it's somewhat happening organically, but it's also happening in these kinds of situations where the setting's been placed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome. And, you know, I think about, I mean, one, I appreciate you for being on the pod and sharing your experience as people make these kind of decisions on the next leaders of their district, of the city. And so your insight and perspective has been super helpful. So thank you for that. I was thinking about, when we met, and I don't remember why we met, but I'm so thankful that you're one of the first people I met in Fort Worth. And so thank you for kind of taking, you know, me under your wing and you know, talking about Fort Worth and keeping me excited to care about it, as I was a new person here. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, it's awesome to hear that. And I can tell you, I was having coffee at Avoca on Magnolia with Carly, and we were brainstorming other people that, you know, to connect with and whatnot. And you happened to be there, and she had mentioned you and said, do you guys know each other? And there you go.
Yes, that was it. And so crazy that, you know, I just interviewed Carly and had her on the pod. So it's going to be really cool. We're bringing it all back. And so that's awesome. So, well, I thank you for being on the pod, and really looking forward to just kind of what you do as the new executive director of Leadership Fort Worth. Congrats, and just thank you for being a friend.
Thanks so much, EJ. It's been a pleasure.
Well, there you have it. We didn't do too bad. Give yourselves a big round of applause. I'm impressed. You know, no co-host, Jimmy, Tony, you're missed, but I felt like we actually were able to create a solid episode. So learned a ton. Got different perspectives, and this is important because early voting for our local leaders start April 19th. And so make sure you kind of explore the candidates, their websites, and also we're interviewing a couple of different candidates, city council. Next week, actually, we're going to also be doing Dr. Jared Williams from District 6. And in the past, we've already kind of had interviews with Maddie Parker, Ann Zeta, two mayoral candidates, and Tara Wilson out of City Council 4. And we're still looking to have a couple other guests until we get to the results. So we're really keeping up with this, as well as next week, we're going to do some traditional kind of episodes where we also talk and highlight some of the news coming out of the Star Telegram, the Fort Worth Business Press, Fort Worth Magazine, and all the other great publications we have in the city. So please subscribe if you have not yet. You know, give us a 5-star rating if you haven't done that, but you're a regular listener, and just really thankful for you guys spending time with us on Monday or whenever you listen to the pod. So take care. Have a wonderful day.
Alright.